Joining me this week is an author, a theoretical physicist, and a professor at the School of Earth and Space Exploration at Arizona State University. Lawrence Krauss, welcome to the Rubin Report.
It's great to be here.
You are in the middle of like 8,000 things, and we're going to have to use some theoretical physics to fit this in the space-time continuum.
Yeah, 8,000 plus or minus a million, yeah.
Yeah, plus or minus a million. All right, well, I'm very excited to talk to you. I think I publicly shamed you into doing this several times at the Reason Rally.
Yeah, well, it's hard to publicly shame me, but you did try. Yeah, you did. Yeah, but I wanted to do it. It's just a matter of fitting it in. It's great that we can be here today.
Yeah, all right, so I'm very excited. You're heading to UCLA to do some more talks after this, but let's jump right into the election.
Okay.
Because
we have to.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll talk about science and some other stuff.
Why not?
As a man of science, how do you feel about just the tenor of this? And not just the tenor, but as someone that cares about empirical evidence, that you care about facts, how do you feel about just the state of what is going on right now?
It's every year I always wonder if it could be worse. Because, let's face it, politics and empirical evidence don't go together very well as a rule. And for a long time, I've been interested in trying to make sure public policy is based on that. And in a lot of different ways in my writing, and we actually created a group in 2008 called Science Debate, which we tried to get a presidential debate on issues of science and technology, not to ask them the 10th digit of pi, but I mean, if you the issues that really matter, that are going to affect the future for people, are not the issues that are ever talked about. They're energy, the environment, security. All of that depends on an understanding of science and technology policy, and so it's always been ignored, and we've been frustrated by it. But I have to say that this year, of course, with Donald Trump, takes the cake in so many ways. I wrote a piece in the New Yorker, which more or less called him the anti-science candidate, if such a thing is possible. The only person, I think, on the Republican slate that was more anti-science, remarkably, was Ben Carson.
Right. Let's just talk about Carson real quick, even though I want to focus on Trump.
Why not? Because he's such a fool.
How can you be, he's a
neurosurgeon,
right? How can you be a neurosurgeon and against so many of the things that a scientist has to believe in?
Well, not just against, ignorant about them. That's what amazed me. It's one thing to be ideologically opposed, but he would talk about evolution in a way which clearly didn't understand evolution, which is the basis of biology, besides calling the Big Bang a hoax from the devil and all. I mean, just...
well, that's a fact.
Yeah, exactly. That and the fact we didn't land on the moon. But, so what it demonstrates is, and it's unfortunate, but actually it's relevant. My mother wanted me to be a doctor, and she made the mistake of sort of getting me interested in science and wanted to be a scientist. And then I discovered when I was in high school that doctors weren't scientists. I apologize to all doctors in the audience, but they're not. And he's a perfect example. To be a good doctor, that's not to say, I mean, many doctors try and keep up with science, obviously.
Sure.
But to be a good neurosurgeon requires eye-hand coordination and an understanding of what to do when you open up a brain. I will get in trouble for saying this, but it's a very sophisticated kind of car mechanic. And so he clearly was very good at those technical things, but obviously, he not only did not know much science, but he willfully, and this is the real problem with religion, with someone like him, he decides what's right based on the scriptures, and anything disagrees with it must be wrong. And that's the real difference between religion and science, where in religion, you know the answers before you ask the questions. And in science, we try and ask the questions and find out the answers, and they may surprise us.
Yeah, and they may change over the course of time.
Not only may, they often do. And the willingness to say you're wrong or to change your mind is profoundly important in science, which brings us back to Donald Trump.
But real quick, just to finish with Carson, because it's such an interesting example of this. I'm glad you made the distinction of saying that he's a neurosurgeon, not a scientist, as I've now fumbled it twice.
It's okay.
Because a neuroscientist has to really have the scientific knowledge. The way you're describing a souped-up car mechanic, it's like really he's doing a physical act.
He's repairing damage, and he needs to know how to do that. And again, one doesn't want to generalize for all neurosurgeons based on Ben Carson, but it demonstrates that there's a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming he was good at what he did, and it wasn't all hype. I'm willing to grant him that. But in everything else he says, he expressed more ignorance, not just antagonism, but ignorance about fundamental science than any other candidate in the Republican Party, which says a lot because it has unfortunately become the anti-science party of late. And it wasn't always that way. The Republican Party has been a big supporter of science over the years. Right now, because they insist on denying the existence of climate change, and many on the right insist on denying the existence of evolution or even the Big Bang, and their attitudes towards homosexuality, they have necessity, by ideology, been forced to confront the evidence of science and ignore it or disregard it or lie about it.
Right. So basically, they've staked out a position based on non-fact, and then that sort of boxes them in their own
That's the real
sort
problem. What do you do when you're wrong? And you can't afford to say you're wrong. And the problem, actually, the real problem with politics is people are not willing to say, you know what, we had this policy, but it was wrong. We've changed our minds because the public. One of the reasons I wanted to insert more science into public policy is not the knowledge of science, but the process of science, which is based on empirical evidence and testing and evolving your views. And if we really want to have sound public policy, we can't just be willing to say, oh, well, someone was wrong once and therefore, we're not going to listen to them. Stating that you're wrong and explaining why is, to me, raises you to a higher level.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. In fact, as a scientist, I often say, as a theoretical physicist, I say the two greatest states to be in are being wrong or confused, because then it means there's a lot more to learn.
Yeah, there's a little room there for
a
some
lot
change.
of room. I mean, it's really, learning is a process of discovering errors in what you were thinking. And I've said, in fact, my new book, I said somewhere that science, one of the purposes of science is to make people uncomfortable. And I don't mean that in a bad sense, but if we're always comfortable, it means we're never going outside our comfort zone. It means our myopic views are never being questioned or confronted. And that's what living is all about. That's what music, art, and literature are all about. I mean, it's, I'll bring in, happens to be today, I'm excited because Bob Dylan just won the Nobel Prize in Literature.
I just saw.
But people like Bob Dylan force us to confront, I remember when I was young, our views about way society worked. And science should be the same way. And good politicians should be all about that. It's amazing to me when I've been in some other countries and confronting presidents or prime ministers who actually know something.
Yeah.
And then that's not to say, Obama's anyway, I don't want to.
I'll
get hate mail no matter what.
Yeah, so. You're going to get hate mail. Well, wait till you see what happens on Twitter. But we can talk about Obama and Clinton too. But interestingly, it sounds like you're saying you don't necessarily care if the president knows that much about science, but you at least want them to be intellectually curious enough to assign the right people to deal with it.
Look, the president can't be an expert in everything.
Yeah.
But the president needs to know they're not. The first thing is to know you're not an expert in everything, which Donald Trump hasn't yet figured out.
Right.
And secondly, to be intellectually curious. And thirdly, to choose the right people. That's really what you want a president to do, is have good advisors, is to know enough to distinguish people who are full of garbage, I'll use that word, and people you can trust, whose opinions you can trust, because you know that they're willing to be wrong too. And so I think that's really the mark of a president. And in the current climate, you obviously can't be an expert in anything. And it amazes me when we talk about having debate on science, they say, well, the president shouldn't be a scientist. But we have a debate on national security, but the president doesn't have to be a military expert. He has to surround himself or herself with reasonable people who know what's going on, or on diplomacy.
So is the intellectual curiosity part of it, is that the part that about Trump gets you the most?
Well, it's intellectual curiosity and skepticism. And skepticism is a key part of science. Asking yourself, is this evidence reasonable, and why should I believe that? Yeah, the thing that, it's hard to know what, Trump is such an anomaly, but the fact that when he says, who do you take advice from? He says, from myself, because I know. That or when someone says that, no matter what they're running for, whether it's president or head of a school board or whatever, you should worry about that.
Right.
And so I think it's that, and his incredible anger and vindictiveness. And people have called him a bully, but I did a dialogue with a Hollywood friend of mine named Johnny Depp, and he pointed out that wasn't who he actually played Donald Trump in you should watch it on Netflix. There's a great show where he looks just like him. It's great. Okay. But he said that Donald Trump isn't a bully, he's a brat. And that defines the man to me. He's not a bully so much as just a spoiled brat who if he's losing, finds a reason to blame other people. Again, he's the center of his own universe. And all of that is terrifying and ignorant in the extreme. I mean, when I wrote about science and the candidates this year, one of the statements that Trump made that just to me epitomizes the level of ignorance of the man. Because, first of all, a lot of what he says is just meant, he doesn't care whether it's true or not, he thinks it'll play well or not. That I can understand.
That's politics.
But when you say, why are we worried about the ozone? Why can't I have, aerosols in my hairspray? Because I only use my hairspray indoors. So it can't affect it can't affect the atmosphere.
Is that one real?
Yeah, he really said that. Now, that's the kind of thing you say, oh my goodness gracious.